Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy that one more time I get the opportunity to be with dear brothers and sisters of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Society of New England and Zerk MIT Shia Muslim Association. As Dr. Masalai said, this is the third lecture of the lecture series Hikmah in the Quran. The title of this lecture is Wisdom in the Tradition Before Islam. We want to see our Hikmah or wisdom, how was they understood in all the traditions before Islam, and how that may shape people, contemporary people in the time of Prophet, uh, their understanding of wisdom, because this word was used, was common uh, before among the Arabs and both mushrikeen and non-mushrikeen and so on. So we kind of discussed that. So I start as usual with this verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤتى الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. He grants wisdom to whomever he wishes, and he who is given wisdom is certainly given an abundant good, and none takes admonition except those who possesses intellect. Um, as we discuss, as I said before, the thesis of Dr. Saghab Hussein will be our foundational reference for all these lectures. We saw in the first lecture that about the word hikmah in Quran has come 20 times in 19 verses, twice in the verse we just recited. Six of the verses were Meccan and 13 other verses on Medina. In the first lecture, we divided them and categorized them in four categories of hikmah given to the previous prophets, hikmah revealed to Prophet Muhammad, hikmah to non-prophets, and teaching hikmah among the four primary duties of Prophet Muhammad. So that we discussed in the first lecture. In the second lecture, we went through the classical commentators' understanding of the word hikmah in the Quran, and also modern commentators. And we saw generally uh, there were two groups. Maybe I read the kind of the conclusion of the second lecture, that we may broadly divide most of the various definitions surveyed of the Qur'anic Hikmah in two groups. First, there are those interpretations that made Hikmah some component or instance of divine revelation. By Hikmah, they understood as a part of the Quran or part of some previous divine revelation. And then this includes definition that equate Qur'anic Hikmah with the biblical books such as Psalms or the Gospels. Second, we have definitions that this is more seen on the modern ones. Second, we have definitions that make hikmah a human faculty of understanding, synonym with the human intellect and al, or related to human and al. And also, I have to say, some people also consider hikmah to be the sunnah, the binding sunnah of the prophet, not part of the scripture, not part of the Quran, but the sunnah, which we usually, when in the hadith الثقلين, when with Ahl Sunnah is referred Kitabullah wa Sunnati, that's Sunnah. But going back to this second definition, which understood hikmah as an ability of human faculty of understanding, uh, and synonym with the human intellect and app, usually they also understood that hikmah, so far it means understanding or intellect, is frequently correctly to understanding scripture. So, that ability to understand or comprehend or intellect foremost must be applied correct understanding to the scripture. And as we will see, there will be considerable merit in each of these two groups of definitions. You see why each group maybe has claiming this first, such supporting my view, claiming other groups support, says this other verses support my view. But what we want to do, which is part of the uniqueness of these lecture series or difference, is this. Uh, what we look, the Quran is revealed foremost to the people of the time of Prophet. And although it's universal forever for everybody, but is communicating and in dialogue with the people contemporary to type of prophet, the first generation of Muslims. So one idea to understand what wisdom really Quran meant by wisdom is try to understand what maybe those people understood. So what we want to do is through a close reading of the relevant Quranic texts and by situating the Quran within the late antique wisdom discourse. That antique period is the centuries from 3rd to maybe 8th or century of AD, usually called late antique. So by situating Quran within late antique wisdom discourse, we will attempt to demonstrate the Quran discourse on Hikmah stands in continuity with the evolving Near Eastern and more specifically biblical wisdom tradition. So Quran gets engaged, gets in dialogue with them, and somehow responding, correcting, and gives its own understanding or of wisdom, although somehow also maybe vindicate or support or restate some of the wisdom ideas in the previous scriptures. Situating the Quran within the broader wisdom discourse will enable us to refine both the aforementioned groups of definition, and we will see precisely which component of revelation is equated with hikmah in the Quran and what is exactly meant by the human faculty called hikmah. So kind of we want to go the middle way and somehow kind of get a way that includes both definition. But that will be the goal of the whole lecture series. But that you see puts us the task today. We'll see what was the understanding wisdom in before Islam. So kind of where we have to look the wisdom or what kind of understanding of wisdom was that were there. Robert Wilken is, it's kind of at the end of conference in 1973. He kind of did some conclusions which are relevant for us. So we learned that wisdom is an extraordinary cross-cultural phenomena, which is, we'll see, is true. Much of these wisdom literature, wisdom aphorisms, every human being can connect with them. We can relate with some of the Chinese wisdom, the Greek wisdom, the Arabic wisdom, the Persian wisdom. That we'll see that kind of wisdom aphorisms or sayings are usually at that time. We learn that wisdom is an extraordinary, like for example, the verses in the Quran, the advice Luqman give to his son. It is very universal. And that we'll see one of the feature of wisdom is, or the verses 22 to 39 of Surah Al-Isra. Again, we see that general commandments to be humble or to be the kind to your parents is really cross-cultural. So we learned that wisdom was an extraordinary cross-cultural phenomenon and could be found in different forms in all the religious currents of late antiquity. So is not limited. Everybody, every group, every civilization somewhat had that. And wisdom literature, which is genre of literature, seem always have been an accepted intercultural and interethnic coinage that people use and borrow from each other. People get the wisdom saying of other culture, civilization, religion, and make it their own, and sometimes coin it in their own. So, for example, I said I use always to see Rasul Hakma Makhafat Allah, the beginning or the head of the wisdom is fearing God. So this was always ascribed to Prophet Muhammad, but now we know, okay, this is in the books of Proverbs and ascribed to Solomon. This is common. This is common. And if you see, and much of it also goes to Hadith literature and kind of which happens, and this is how cultures and people act and function. So as I was reading, wisdom literature seems always to have been accepted intercultural and interethnic coinage, appropriated as religiously neutral and non-committal. So getting the wisdom of the other religion is not produce sensitivity in our own religion. If people wouldn't do that, they usually feel it, okay, this is wise, this is okay, this is harmonious with my religion. If it says, do not steal, do not lie, do not kill, it is agreeable with me too. and if accepting that, I'm not kind of crossing my religion, you know. Not all things are like that, you know. So uh so if you do some of the rituals of Judaism or some of the prayers of Christianity, it's not really acceptable in Islamic context or vice versa. But wisdom sayings and literature are not like that. What we are going to do will be a selection. I mean, I would be very, very selective in the uh, span we can do. There is no time for it. So this lecture would not be a comprehensive introduction to wisdom in late antiquity, but some of the wisdom which is related to Qur'anic Hikmah, which I think we maybe need future, or if we need referencing to it, already we have heard something about it. So look, this could be a table of type of things we can discuss and related to Quranic wisdom. I'm going to discuss natural law and natural morality. That's actually very important. I think setting the tone. But if you want to see what kind of wisdom literature or wisdom sayings may be related to understanding wisdom in the Quran, similarities or background, cultural background, is one is the Hebrew Bible, you know, the Old Testament, you know, the Torah and the Old Testament, the sacred books of the Jews, which Quran engaged with them. Jews were living in Medina, and the whole this Hebrew Bible was accepted part of Christian canon. Some of his sayings and knowledge and wisdom was spread, and then at least in other parts of Arabia, maybe northern part, Yemen, and people would have heard them, Hebrew Bible wisdom. Then there is a class of books we will see, canonical wisdom. These are the books that Catholics, because they were written in Greek. The Hebrew Bible books, I will show you later on, maybe the books of the Bible, but the Bible books which accepted Old Testament by the Jews were written originally in Hebrew. And then for a while, some Greek books become common between them when they become Hellenized after Alexander. For a while, they were using them, but when they're canonizing later on, the Jewish people do not accept these books written originally in Greek as accepted, but Christians did. So it is part of the Old Testament section of Catholics and Orthodox churches. So these got called Deuterocanonical because the Protestant, when it came, they said, okay, we only accept those parts of Old Testament or what Jews accept. So they put these aside. So when you go to buying a Bible, if it was Protestant, you don't see these books in the Bible. So these are supplementary. But you go Catholic one, you see them. Which we a little bit discuss some of them. Then there is wisdom in early Jewish literature, which they themselves never say they're sacred wisdom, like Golestan in Persian poetry, or many other books are wisdom in it, lots of wisdom, but they're not sacred or scripture. But that type of literature will affect what people will understand and wisdom or hikmah or something like that. Then we come to New Testament wisdom, which um, this is interesting and important. And then we know much of the teaching of Jesus is that time. And among that, we'll see. I will not investigate all of these because we don't have time. We don't do wisdom in early Jewish literature. Then after New Testament, we have the fathers of the early Christian leaders for a few hundred years before Islam. They have generated books, generated writing. Some of are great philosophers, theologians. So you see the idea of wisdom among them, which influenced the culture. Like nowadays, the what Ali Mutahari wrote, other people wrote, affect the culture. Then we have rabbinic wisdom, so after close to the time that Christianity come to the scene, the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, so Jews were spread, and then the whole new system of Judaism, which we developed, called rabbinic wisdom or rabbinic Judaism. So they have their own wisdom literature, which we don't have time to look at it. Then the more very famous and big one is philosophical wisdom. The whole word falsafa or Sophia means wisdom, and And Sufis claim we are wise people, we are owner of wisdom. Socrates came, no, I'm lover of wisdom. Philo means loving something. So philosophical philosophy means lover of wisdom. That kind of wisdom, because of the dominance of Hellenic culture, was very dominant. That was understood to be a comprehensive way of life. And some other version of it mixed with the Roman might and army, is very formidable king like Stoics, which have very great influence on the understanding of wisdom. For example, people nowadays still read Marcus Aurelius' book uh, as I forgot the contemplation or reflections, or as wisdom book, and is really the guy in any sense is wise, as you can see, because he was emperor too, similar to the Luqman. What we see with the similar is not just the meaning. You do see the literature. I will show you some examples. What Luqman advised his son in the Quran, you can see the type of sentences we are referring, what kind of thing we are referring. And then non-biblical Arabian wisdom. Uh, we know Luqman is accepted, maybe non-prophetic, and then Tabari reports that people knew about Luqman wisdom before Islam, which that's the reason his name was mentioned, and then some other ones. And so that we briefly look, and then a little bit Arabic poetry regarding Hikmah and the Arabic, pre-Islamic Arabic poetry. So we are not discussing all of these uh, because there's not time. Even I'm not sure the one I want to discuss, we will get time to do it. But look, one of the tensions we saw, one of the things which is exists regarding the wisdom, the moment you start to discuss it, and because the history have been existed, come to the fore is this. So one of the primary dilemmas related to wisdom discourse within the scriptural tradition. So if you want to discuss it in the context of Quran, Bible, Torah, Old Testament, New Testament, we believe in revelation, is this: what is the relationship between wisdom and divinely revealed scripture? And we saw whether wisdom is only can be gained or is a part of divinely revealed scripture, or wisdom can be attained, or is something in separate and distinct. And we had the both trends when we last week we reviewed the classical commentators. We saw both there. So the question will be, if people can attain wisdom that enables them to discern how best to live their lives, what is the purpose of scripture? Soon came this whole issue of reason and revelation came. And then what's the function of revelation? And then the whole issue of morality, good or bad, because much of the wisdom is to know how to live a good life. I mean, Socrates said, examine life, and the goal of wisdom, especially usually defined moral advices, and then how to be successful, have a good life, moral life here, this life, and if believe hereafter, the hereafter. This question is most pertinent for our study and is useful entry point for many of the wisdom texts we will consider. A further concern we will see is how wisdom to be attained, because we see even the verse of Quran is I mean, the one who receives wisdom have received a great blessing. So how you acquire wisdom? Although in Quran, everything in some sense is given by God, everything is uh, God is hand to giving it, bestowing it. But we mean here is wisdom. We kind of understood that wisdom is not necessarily limited to the prophets, is not acquired only to those channel of revelations, but other people, ordinary people can acquire it too. And then kind of, the last sentence wants to clarify it. Is it through human effort? Wisdom is acquired and is thus at least potentially universally accessible, or is it divinely bestowed upon an elite? Elite means here, okay, those who receive revelation or wahy or something like that. So these questions soon came. Soon, very immediately, you start to discuss, came through and comes, and then the mind is engaged. And then we will see the Bible. I'm not sure how much detail I can show you, but we'll see one or two examples. We'll see Bible itself is not just even outside Bible. People start to notice this. Yeah, it is. The discussion hyped for the pre-Islamic wisdom tradition when the Hebrew or Jewish or Old Testament people confronted Greek philosophy. That really the issue of reason revelation come to the fore. We have it later on, when the Rosh is this topic is there when you have Aristotelian philosophy is very uh, become common in Islamic land. We always have these tensions over there. Still, we have it. So we see Bible itself grapples with the relationship between human wisdom and divine revelation. So we see that. And then attempts to resolve the tension are not unique to scriptural texts, although we see even before these traditions, we saw it, it seems, the work of Plato. Uh, Plato, in a sense, addressed the same problem in what has come to be known as Euthyphro dilemma. Look, the wording of Plato is that which is wholly loved by the gods because it is holy, or is it holy because it is loved by the gods? So this is like the one we have in Farsi. آنچه آن خسرو کند شیرین بود یا آنچه شیرین بود آن خسرو کند. Whether some action is good because it's ordered by God, or God only order or prescribe or legislate or make a law, something it is good. And then, in Islamic tradition, we have two big camps, Ash'ari and Mu'tazile. Mu'tazile, which are more rational, and Shia is close to them. They insisted no, there is some intrinsic goodness in the actions, and and some action is good or bad or even in itself, and not only this is intrinsic to the action, and God ordered that thing to be done which is good, and will not order or uh, prescribe evil not to be done, but the reason also can discover it. This second part, I think, is a little bit this thing I'm going to explain. But let's see. So these are Mu'tazila and Shia, always Mu'tazila, and the whole issue of adl, justice, which we have usul ad-din, it is exactly for this discussion. When we say God is just, is exactly mean God cannot order or ask somebody to do something is not good, or vice versa, and then and that puts a criterion of good or bad separate and independent action of God. But Ash'ari were reversed. They say no, there is no criteria, because they take the word Islam, taslim, to a limit, and they say, okay, there is no good or bad except what God has prescribed. And God can send very good people to hell for no good reason, and take very bad people like Yazid to heaven for no good reason. And if it did it, that's good. If it doesn't do it, it's bad. And there is no other criterion like that. That's extreme. Ashari, you see, is a very extreme uh, law. They call it divine command theory of ethics. But in Shia tradition, as Awai Mutahari is the one discussed this topic the most in Ad-Dalahi and other books, and then we said actions as intrinsic good or bad. Husna Zati, they have intrinsic goodness, intrinsic evilness in them. And then the other thing is that the mind can't find it. The reason can discover this. And actually, wisdom was, or seeking wisdom was the foremost to discovering this. And this is understood by the traditional philosophy, that you seek in wisdom, and then sometimes they go, philosophers they become too extreme, some line of what I would say we see in Avicenna, maybe Ibn Rushd, that okay, the scripture is good for the commoner, which they don't have the time, the ability, mental ability to go this, following this path of philosophical exercise, or exercise mean living to discerning good or bad. So the revelation is needed for them, but for the other people can't distinguish, which can find it themselves. And that means gaining wisdom separate or independent from scripture. I don't think is that simple. If something may be rational, and if reason see all the evidence will agree it is rational, but because we do not see I'm kind of going a little bit ahead some of the topics. I have to go to the next section, but let me say it now. If I repeat it, okay, I'm repeating it, or maybe not repeating it. Because we have unseen many events are this world exists of babe and unseen and seen. This world, visible world. The two are not completely separate from each other, Islamic view. And some of the action, like an iceberg, you see the tip, but the bigger part is underneath the water. And there is a connection. So some of the causal chains or reasons we do not see. So we may not know the Saleh Rahim can extend the life of the person, uh, how much the person will live. But if the mechanism become disclosed, which after death and after hereafter these mechanisms become disclosed, it is rational. So every prescription or every command or every action which is ordered and forbidden is rational, but whether we can discover this is not. I mean, even we have in logic that Gödel's theorem, stuff like that, you cannot prove everything inside in a logical system. There are some things you can never prove. This is another thing. And I think here is that we are not able to practically, by our limit, it is rational, but our reasons cannot allow us to do it. And also, scripture has the motivational factor in it, which actually, some of the commentators emphasize that admonition part, because they call that part hikmah. They saw there's a law, the Sharia law in the Quran, and the hikmah is the exhortation by God to do that. But we say is more. So but this tension, we have it today. Today, we have it between fiqh and akhlaq, and they always say which one is priority, and then we'll see. Okay, I kind of went ahead of myself, but some of the things I want to say later, I said it now, but we'll see it again. Look, Greco-Roman philosophical and legal tradition, in particular Stoics, which are important, influential, and especially the period we're talking, exactly after Marcus Aurelius. If you see the film Gladiator, the guy Maximus was the general of, or Marcus Aurelius. Stoics become very influential in Christianity, brands of philosophy, and a combination of that philosophic outlook with Christianity become very potent. Stoicism really need a religious element, and then it affects Islamic morality and thinking too. And now it's reviving. Some people want to invest some kind of morality, but not necessarily religious based or something like that. Maybe I Malakian is one a representative of it. Anyway, in Iran. But anyway, Greco-Roman philosophical and legal tradition, particularly Stoics, effectively answered the dilemma with the former of the two alternatives. So that they are like Shias would say, God, which is holy, is loved by God, not reverse. Or an Khosrow anche shirin بود does anche which is good and true. Right and wrong, according to discourses, are not will of the divine sovereign, they're in husn but are a natural part of the universe, mentally perceptible by rational human beings. This part I'm saying, in principle, yes, but in practice, not always. And this natural law is anterior to any legal code. This is important when it goes to the discussion with Sharia laws and the Jewish one, being a rational order that is unwritten, universal, eternal, unchanging. This universalness of eternal and unchanging ones, and it's the same for everyone. I mean, in the sense everybody get in that situation should act the same. That part of it, you should not lie, you should not steal, or you should not kill. And then this moral injunctions or honor your parents, stuff like that. And this is Stoic, from Greek and Stoic influence. It was this shared discourse between biblical wisdom, they call it wisdom, biblical wisdom, and Greco-Roman natural law. Okay, they introduced a concept called natural law, which I will explain. This is a huge concept. And then we maybe use some other equivalent of it later on that enabled some early Jewish writers and Christian writers throughout late antiquity to embrace natural law. So somehow the wisdom, biblical wisdom, or the wisest they find in the Bible, make it equal to Greco-Roman natural law. So they also move to this first option. They find some, like Mu'tazila, find some intrinsic good or bad in any action. We can understand rabbinic and Christian wisdom discourses attempt to grapple with the dilemma of how to relate natural law of wisdom, natural law or wisdom to divine law with starkly different outcomes. Rabbis reduce biblical wisdom to divinely proclaimed positive law. Okay, natural law is, I put this slide, yeah. Natural law, let us see here because this is important for the whole discussion. Natural law is in front of or is versus positive law. We have to confronting with positive law. Positive here it doesn't mean plus negative, positive negative. It means posited, legislated by humans, usually means. But then the legislature could be God, and then that makes it different. If God is legislator, things will be different. So in Farsi we have, or in Islamic tradition we have قانون تکوینی, قانون تشریعی, or سنت تکوینی, سنت تشریعی. Takwin is قانون تکوینی is natural law, something in the order of the universe, or the trend of things, or the process of things that makes this intrinsically bad, intrinsically good, intrinsically right, and or you have to behave like that. It's not necessarily physical laws in the sense, your hand will burn if you put it in the fire or something like that, but it also covers the moral law. But comparison to what was legislated, what is prescribed, and then you can see that the tension is today. Akhlaq, many of the thinkers put it in natural law, and then because in Shia tradition still we are Mu'tazili, we believe in intrinsic good or bad, but then somehow they're contrasting it with the fact, which they think is the legislative law, and they give priority to akhlaq, some of people, or vice versa, and then they call it tashri. But when the point is that, and you see the Jewish tendency is to get prominence to the law, because Torah is law, everything of the law, to the legislative law, but because it's a divine legislation, in some sense, it's natural law too. But that actually is more Islamic view. Jews, I don't, as we see, I don't think they push it to this level. And it's, let's see, we go on, not going ahead of myself. So rabbis reduce biblical wisdom to divinely proclaim positive law. So they said this Torah prescription with sometimes the very ritualistic, very minute, put this candle here, burn it this time, do it this way. They all considered somehow, they tried, because they were always criticized by the Greek. What is the basis of this, what you do here? Seems nothing in it. So maybe not eating pork is understandable, because maybe you claim there's some problem with eating that type of meat, but some other things you do is not very clear. But the problem is this: you cannot easily limit it, because if you push it that line, many other rituals, especially in other rituals, why you do the 4 rakah or 3 rakah or 5 rakah, I would discuss why is not 5 rakah, for example. Why is 2 rakah? So these, sometimes we see, uh, uh, is it any reason necessarily 2 rakah, 3 rakah, especially the ritual or posited law, legislated law, or especially, or except it is this, and what is coming out, the obedience. But let's go further, and then I have discussion in the natural law section. Church fathers invoke wisdom, or more usually the natural law, with which wisdom came to be identified. So they gradually, under influence of this is after in the fathers of the church in the centuries after Jesus to before Islam, because they were influenced by philosophy and Hellenic culture, they noticed, okay, this idea of the wisdom maybe can be harmonized by natural law in Greek philosophy or Roman understanding. So Christian fathers invoke wisdom, or more usually the natural law, with which wisdom came to be identified as the filter that would determine which laws from the Hebrew Bible were still relevant for Christians. Okay, because we know, they took two very different tendencies. Christians mostly reject the laws in Hebrew Bible. They kept some of those basic moral injunctions. They consider moral. But all those rituals like circumcision, all those stuff, they put it aside. They said these are ritual. And they said doing circumcision, not doing that is nothing in it, nothing important, just symbolic. So but killing somebody, lying, or doing other fornication, all those stuff, yeah, these are evil in itself. So because they were more inclined to the natural law, and the wisdom discussion, especially when you look, even in Quran, you look, there are avoid of these ritualistic dimensions. You look to the advices of Luqman, or the advices we saw in Surah, or the what we see in Surah Al-Isra is like that. So they find a way to say, okay, the time of those laws are past. We do not need to obey, but what we need to choose or keep. But the rabbis do reverse. They say, no, everything in Torah has came. These are they are legislated by God. We have to obey it. This is the sense of wisdom. Uh, but gradually they want to say, okay, maybe there is a reason behind it, or the reason is pure obedience. Always you can say, okay, there is no reason in itself, but the fact of obedience it is. Like I give you one example. We don't want to solve this. These are very big philosophical problems. Takes lectures to do it. I'm just saying, let's have these in background. Just I want to stimulate your mind. For example, General Norman Schwarzkopf, when the commander of Gulf War One, uh, yeah, it was one. Yeah, he was studying in West Point, the important military school of United States. And his memoirs wrote, there are very some strange regulation over there. The West Point is a nice place, very greenery surrounding it, and I think the building with this dorm they slept or leave was 4th floor, and then the windows were big. But sometimes the rule was that the first year you shouldn't look outside the window. Absolutely nonsense. But then one time I think he did, and he reported that, okay, I sorry sir, I looked outside the window. Then he said, oh, you're such a good guy, come and tell me you told us, although we know nobody noticed it, there wasn't camera. But they punished him. And then the other thing is that, for example, dear lunch, which is the time people rest and talk, you cannot talk with the people sitting left and right to you, and then there is another guy standing behind you and just shouting and you eat, eat, eat. Okay. uh these things, especially looking out of the window, has nothing intrinsic good or bad in it. I think looking out the window, a good scenery, but the whole idea they may be okay by disciplining you put is not wisdom in the action, but just obeying something, which Ash'ari is kind of pushing it like that. But the whole thing is that whether we think Quran have this kind of legislations, it's complicated. It's complicated. Now, so as you look, broadly speaking, the church fathers get privilege or precedence to natural law, or wisdom to the positive law, which they considered uh, the law in Torah, which is full of it. And then the rabbis did reverse, privilege the law over the so-called wisdom and natural law. And Saddam Hussein is arguing the whole thesis. Quran is much closer to Christian understanding, which we have to see. I think again, Quran would go a middle way, and I agree with him. But Quran middle way, and somehow all the legislation of Quran are somewhat rational or in accordance with natural law, and its injunctions are kind of the part which Jews want to push to it. Uh, but they didn't completely do it. I think they did it later on after the Islam and so on. Okay, anyway, I want to just get some idea. So Quran requires its own laws be understood to the filter of hikmah. That's the point. Look, indeed, the Quran goes further. Whereas for the church fathers, natural law was a convenient means by which to deal with the legislative content of the Old Testament, while avoiding the Marcionite heresy of dismissing the Hebrew scripture altogether as a work of inferior deity. Look, there was a guy in the end of first century, second century, Marcionite. He came and said, look, this God pictured in the Old Testament doesn't match anything with the God in New Testament, and he wants to completely throw away the Old Testament and completely separate ways. And then he even said that God who revealed, because so the polytheistic, very strange views. So he believed in Jesus and the New Testament thing, but he wants to completely separate the Old Testament. And then he said this is a different God than the God of New Testament and so on. Okay, because they didn't want the Christians at that time completely dissociate from uh, the Jewish background they had, so they considered this kind of a heresy, uh, confronting him. But he has a long-lasting effect. For example, he forced them to choose which books are canonical or not because he's the first one make a canonical collection for himself. But it was much less number of the books now is canonizing Bible, and it's a long story. Uh, but the Christians, so you see, still the dilemma they had. By accepting Old Testament or Hebrew Bible and adding it to New Testament and putting in one volume, called them Bible and called them sacred, you have stuck in a problem we haven't not coming out. And much of the problems, even we see Christian Zionism here, is because of one of the wrong solutions for this dilemma they took. That's another lecture. But for the Quran, so I don't go this line, but these are all somewhat, this tension is raised its head some different places. For the Quran, the relationship between Hikmah and law includes the former's proper connection to the Quran's own laws rather than those of a previous dispensation. Okay, the problem with Christianity was that the laws of another tradition, which was a Jewish one, how to handle it, which one they keep, which one they don't keep. Well, so Quran doesn't have this problem, but then kind of we have to see every legislation in Quran is also in concordance with hikmah, wisdom, natural law, and so on. Quran requires even that his own laws be understood through the filter of hikmah, which we have to see more in other lectures. So besides summarizing in the rest of the time we have, which I have to go a little bit faster, besides summarizing the wisdom discourses connected to biblical tradition, we will look to two discourses. Actually, I'm only going to look one. We don't have time to the other one. Two discourses that are independent of the Bible. We are not going to look philosophical wisdom. I'm not sure Quran directly engaged with the Greek philosophical wisdom. And the evidence they show, although people start to talk about it like Juan Cole, and this is not getting new fashion, the Quran is directly engaging with the Greek philosophical wisdom and intertextually with them. I'm not sure about that, but definitely indigenous Arabian wisdom tradition, we have to briefly look. So I'm going to do a little bit biblical, but a little bit also indigenous Arabian wisdom tradition. So because this is important, definitely Arabs were familiar with the wisdom. I mean, you have ideas. This guy was wise. This guy was they call him Nabighe, or this guy was. I mean, Abdul Muttalib was looked as a wise man. So in one sense, they consider wise and so on. Okay. Okay, okay, but still, although I did some of the discussion already, but I want to do a little bit more systematic discussion, natural moral law, because even uh, more than example, biblical literature, this tension is important, even irrespective of this idea is important. So I go a little bit through it, and now I'm adding the word fitra. So look. Uh, Natural law is the word the Greek philosophy used. Then later on, actually, they used moral law, especially regarding to what to do, what not to do, uh, because natural law sometimes give the idea or bring to mind the issues related to physics or biology or so on. But in this sense, they meant more general things, which is in accordance to the to the intrinsic nature of things. So morality was considered like that. But then the word moral law is used, which is better. But look, I said we have قانون تكوینی, قانون تشریعی, and also fitra. And the fitra is really, in one sense, is related to natural law, original nature. Because look, if we see these verses of Qur'an, which is فَقَدْ وَجَّهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فَاتَّقَ اللَّهَ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. So this is the underlying principles of morality in Islamic tradition. I'm Mutahari emphasize a lot here fitrat and استقوم ذات amal and justice. لا تبديل لخلق الله ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. So set your heart as a person of pure faith on this religion. What religion? The religion which is the original nature endowed by God, according to which He originated mankind. There is no altering in God's creation. That is the upright religion, but most people do not know. And then he adds, God said, turning to Him in penitence and be wary of Him and maintain the prayer and do not be one of the polytheists. And then we can see this, in one sense, other echo of these kind of, again, maybe the relationship between revelation and this fatra and natural law, how human beings acquire wisdom or knowing what to do or not what to do, which is an important one of wisdom, is that فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قد, actually it's better to read before. وَنَفْسًا وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قد أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقد خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. So by the soul and Him who fashioned it and inspired it with discernment between its virtues and vices. So that part, God always ascribed to it, but the soul or the intellect can discern what is virtuous, what is wise. And this is a mechanism, it seems, independent of the revelation by the book. Is another mechanism God put. That's acquiring that kind of wisdom. And then one who purifies, it is felicitous, one who, and then, but the condition to reach this wisdom, it needs you be purified. It is a positive feedback. You go to the wisdom, you are purified, you gain more wisdom. And one who betrays it fails. Look, the word fitra, I'm not going to do discussion, this is big, but it comes in the Quran 20 times in 6 different forms. But the one we are looking, so much of it is created or initiation. But the one is what we just read is Fitratallahu allati fatara nas. The fitrat is a noun and is nature. So when we're talking about natural law, we kind of referring to the law of fitra, especially in regard to morality. So I want to say this is not very alien and different. And actually, much of the discussion is shaped in a discussion with the Greek and Christian theologian, philosophers, and Mu'tazila were rationalists knowing all those stuff, and the Shia theologians, and so on. Uh, so a brief, I mean, even I'm okay. I know I want to cover other topics too, but I think this natural law, moral law, which I bring much of the discussion earlier, so I will go this path faster, but I think it's crucial for the whole lecture series. And I'm not solving anything. I mean, you guys know, I mean, it's not easy problem, but it need to be background, and any discussion we need to think about it. So attempting to define natural law runs into the very basic problem, because what is understood by the expression has evolved considerably from antiquity, which means the Roman and Greek and Roman time, and late antiquity, is after Christianity, the period we are looking, essentially from third to 8th century AD, then to the medieval era, which started, and that's a very common heritage between Christian and Muslims, and finally to modernity. The concept of natural law can be traced back to ancient Greek dramatists and philosophers. So we see this was a big thing for the Greeks and their philosophers. Usually people give that example following Aristotle to the Sophocles play Antigone. Well, I may pronouncing sometimes Persian way of the thing, Antigone. And then look, this is interesting. This is one of the earliest Greek plays, and the story is this. So you see, Aristotle takes the problem of natural law, says Sophocles is the first one kind of address it. So even put it before Plato, and so Sophocles is a dramatist, not necessarily a philosopher. And after Aristotle, everybody else, okay, give this as a first important example. And in this play, look, we have few characters. The protagonist brother. So Antigone is the brother, a sister of Polynices. Polynices. So, and Polynices has rebelled against his own city, Thebes, against the king of the city, which is his own uncle. So we are talking two brother and sister, which the brother rebels against his own uncle and his own city, uh, and in league with a foreign power attacking his own city. But he's defeated and captured and is killed. Capital punishment is killed. So that's Polynices is killed. But as a continuation of the punishment, uh, Creon, the king of Thebes, declares at the start of the play. That's the play starts from here. None of you hear this stuff later on or somehow, but the play starts this way. Declares at the start of the play that Polynices' body is to be denied burial rights. Okay, this is the part even today's. Look, okay, you may execute the guy, but why you bury them anonymously, or you defile, as we saw in Palestine, the dead body, or you do all those stuff. So he punished because he was angry. He not only execute his nephew, but he says he can not be given burial rights. And the sister defied the king's, which is an uncle, defied the king's decree and buried her brother. And then she's captured. You know, they notice what's happened. They capture him and bring him to the court in front of the king. And this is the confrontation. And Creon, the king, says, "You dare disobey the laws." Nomos, you know that namus, which come Farsi to Arabic to nomos salah. And Antigone answer is the start of somehow the natural law, but you see is vague. And then he says, "It was not Zeus who published this decree." And he said, "What you decreed is," she's in some sense indirect. She said, she wants to say, "This is your law." Okay, it is not the God's law. It is not the Zeus, the God who proclaimed this decree, this law, nor have the powers that rule among the dead impose such laws as these among mankind. So he says, in this legislation, you said that I shouldn't bury my brother is your legislation. Neither Zeus declared it, and nor those they think some, after the view of how that what things after death is complicated. And nor could I think a decree of yours, a man. And then it's at first it's not God's, it's not those who ruling the hereafter. Uh, and then I don't think, nor could I think a decree of yours, a man could override the laws, nomima of the gods, unwritten and unchanging. Not of today or yesterday is their authority. They are eternal. No man saw their birth. So this, it says, is a law intrinsic in the universe, intrinsic in the relationship of the things. It is good or bad in the chain of the actions. And we have this thing too. Even Kant says, okay, I always wonder about this. Uh, Maybe Kant is not as relevant, but he says, I always wonder about the stars in the heaven and the moral law inside of us. Look, if you, for example, in the Nuremberg trial and nowadays the capture of these soldiers that say, okay, I just obey a command. I was ordered to do this, I did it. This is not acceptable because these commands are human commands and cannot override of that moral conscience which we have inside of us, which is that's intrinsic good, or telling us فَلَهَمَا فُجُورًا وَتَقْوَاهَا, or intrinsic goodness. And that's, Antigone says, okay, this is the God laws, this is the natural law, this is uh eternal, and is in the relationship things, like it's like a mathematical relationship, yeah, irrespective which universe you are, it's true somehow. So, and it says I could not, because not bring my, the example maybe not the best example, but we got the idea that because we feel burial is ritualistic, but for her not giving her brother a chance to have a hereafter, because the Greeks said there's not a proper burial, then they don't have the hereafter, and they will suffer all the way to eternity. So she wants to break that cycle. So you see, this idea is there, and this encapsulates well the central theme of the play, the contrast between the laws of man and the laws of God. قانون تشریع, but for now, قانون تشریع is a human legislation, and the law of gods. You know, the meaning has some problem because qanun of gods can be tashri too, you know. So, and then we'll see how this concept a little bit evolves, and then just get the idea to our minds start thinking. The former are praised by the, I mean, you see, when this theater is, a play is done, there is a chorus singing and praising the laws of man. It's like the pushing on you, okay, you should obey, you should obey. But as Korean, but you know, she's not only standing against his uncle in the theater, you have to confront those chorus singers. But as Creon, the king himself eventually acknowledged, are necessary subservient to the unwritten eternal laws. So human legislation cannot override, in that sense, that moral law, that natural law, that قانون الفطرة. Note that the vile Sophists use the phrase laws of the God rather than laws of nature. So, you know, even the confusion is here that Sophocle doesn't use the word law of nature or natural law, but it says laws of the God. And then this a little bit shows the concept wasn't distinct. What distinguished by them was laws legislated by God, laws legislated by human, laws legislated by God are according to the eternal principle of nature. And then the two were synonymous for the Stoics, you know, so this is the ancient understanding. Antigone does not indicate how she knows what the laws of God are. Okay, this is a part. You know, how you know that which laws is laws of God, which is the law of nature. And here revelation is important. Here is revelation is important. I don't think pure reason always can do the good job here. And wisdom, you know, that's knowing which laws are laws of God and obeying it, more importantly, is the wisdom. Possibly, it could be true observation of universally accepted customs or simple moral intuition. You can find it. The lack of clarity we noted earlier regarding the meaning of the expression natural law thus stretches back to the origin of concept itself. And then here is a distinction done, which I think is important again for all our discussion. There are three distinctions. It's a little bit nuanced. I'm not going through all of these clarified because I want to just hear this when we go to the future discussions, future lectures. Look, there are three formulations which we give. What is this natural law of Fitra, or then we would call it even moral law. Natural law classical formulation is the one maybe the Greeks and Roman did. In its classical formulation, which found its fullest expression in the writings of Stoics, it is synonymous with the laws of nature, which latter provide the norms in accordance with which one ought to live. So, some form of idea of justice to putting things the right place. So the same way putting your hand in the fire, you burn, of eating too much sugar, you may get diabetes. Then the same way, if you avoid doing these wrong things, it hurts you, harm you morally, spiritually. Nature being an expression of divine will. So you see again, this section is not much separate. Nature being an expression of divine will, natural law is thus both rational and hence rationally discoverable and of universal validity. It is the same for all people all the time, which is still, we kind of, this is Islamic view partially too, you know, this Sharia legislation, you know, قانون تشریعی is also in some sense, we want to think it is not only rational and also rationally in principle discoverable and of a universal validity, the same for all people, all times. This is some tendency. But you know, things are not so simple sometimes. Let me go forward. Look, you know, the reason Ash'ari came to have upper hand is not no reason. Sometimes things, when you're too rational, it's getting something challenging. For example, why the namaz is 2 rakah or 3 rakah? You have to say there is a reason behind it, but it is in ghaib. I don't know. I agree. But then you cannot change it. But look, we have examples. Uh, the change has happened. For example, Ramye Jamare, there was some pillars, and then we used to stone those pillars, only those pillars. Now there is no pillars, all have gone inside the wall, and people have accepted. Or even when you do tawaf for should be between Rukn Ibrahim, Maqam Ibrahim, and the Kaaba, which is nowadays is really impossible. So let's go back to that Rania Jamare. Okay, is it something intrinsic in that ritual, which is not a moral law, that that piece of stone and that piece of place should be hit, or which was, at least you should hit seven. And I personally, I wasn't sure I did hit seven. I kind of a little bit worried. And then what I have to do, and then somebody give me extra stones, and I throw as much that I know at least I've hit seven. Okay, but nowadays we don't have that problem because it's not a pillar; it is a wall, and then you cannot miss it. You just throw and hit it. So what is happening now? If you really think there is something in ghaib that you had to have hit that pole to things be right, then what we are doing is not right. Sunnis have more, yeah, I mean, this Ash'aris have easy, they take it ritualistic, symbolistic, just obedience. Okay, okay, this is the same. So do it this way or this way. But you cannot take this much too far away, because then you make this wall anywhere at your home and throwing stones against it. And but look, you may see this not okay, is a problem, not a problem. But exactly we have regarding the issue of the beginning of the new moon. Because if we go with the scientific calculations, uh, we can really determine the birth of the moon. Birth of the moon makes sense. Now many people are doing it. Much of the problems will go away. The reason which some people resist birth of moon is say, okay, the Sunnah Prophet wasn't like that. And if we start to do with the birth of the moon or this Wahdat Ufuk, we usually get it one day earlier, possibly Prophet will getting it. But that was a Sunnah Prophet itself too. That was the Sunnah of the Arabs were doing it, and for thousands of years before Prophet were doing it and doing it the same. And it's a convention. We just start this month one day earlier, and we do our month of Ramadan. And they have changed the month. We have an example, Imam Ali. They start the month or started one day later, and some guy from Syria come to Kufa, and they're asking, when did you see guys see the moon? They said, yes, we saw. They shift the day. And we have something like that happen a couple of times with Saudis too. They adjusted, and then we have to do Eid al-Qurban like that. But the point al-Awai Makarim Shirazi and the strongest argument they have to use to not let the traditional will go away. He's like Sistani, is this. Look, what about Layali al-Ghad? And then you have to tie the Layali al-Ghad, just not the layl, I wake up the whole night. It's something metaphysical in the universe is happening. And then that Layali al-Ghad, if I took it one day earlier, what happened to Layali al-Ghad at the time of Prophet? Or how the Layali Qad are there. Although I don't think we understand what Layali Qad is, and Layali Qad maybe is not something separate or parallel happening. It is, Zawai Mutahari said, Layali Qad is that it's the status of the perfect being and those nights. Those nights, the Imam, the perfect human being which exists, upon his meditation, he goes to kind of Miraj. When that happens, the night it happens, it will be the Qad that year. So if you start one day earlier for the Imam Zaman, which is the perfect human being nowadays, it will happen one day earlier. So you can start it earlier. Look, I'm saying some of these discussions between tension between legislative law and rationality are there. So and and then and then Mu'tazila are usually Ash'ari can easily go around these problems because they don't see anything. They just see obedience. Okay. And anyway, so these are just things to think about because it's really taking us a little far away. But let me go further. Nature being an expression of divine will, natural law is thus both rational and hence rational discoverable and of universal validity is the same for all people, all times. This is the first formulation, but then we have a little bit second formulation. It is moral formulation, which represent in turn in the use of the phrase that starts with Cicero, which is an ancient Roman thinker, speaker, and Philo, the Jewish Hellenized philosopher, and the church fathers. It refers to the dictates of human moral reasoning, which is قانون فطره, قانون اخلاقی, moral conscious, فطره, what we call a fitra, and the moral nature of the human being now providing the norms in accordance with which one ought to live. فَلَهَمَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Much of it, that inner instinct tells you this is right, this is not. But you can overshadow it. That's the problem. You need all those laws and regulations, Sharia, قانون تشريع, to keep that flame alive, not burying it under or other vices. So I think we are going to use moral law, moral formulation, more natural morality. But for now, the natural law word has been very used. And then in its legal formulation, it refers to those laws that alone are legally binding on human beings as a result of their cohering with a set of moral principles that transcend the legal realm. So, that's the one we kind of say, if you take a Nuremberg trial, that you cannot follow the order no matter how much legislated. You only have to bind to moral principles. So, I mean, I'm not saying these are very different, but I think we go with the second definition. Let's go forward, I think. Anyway, let's script this, and then if we have time, I will come back, or in the lectures which is exactly related to this topic, I will bring it back because I may need to do. Okay, look, this issue is natural law, natural morality, how the Christian, Jewish one react to it is important, but for now, I think we don't have time. I don't want. So look, there is in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, there are some books which called wisdom literature. So this Protestant version of Bible, which is it has few books less than the Catholic version. There are some books which are actually, maybe this is the bigger one because it has all of them. Sorry. So it's maybe this Catholic version. So these are Old Testament books and these are New Testament ones. So we now look at the Old Testament. Look, these are written as poetry, but I mean, yeah, I think maybe one of them is not here. So maybe I'm not sure it's Protestant Catholic. I have to check it carefully. But look, there are a few books which called wisdom books. We will see that. The foremost is Proverbs. And then we will see that. Then it is Book of Job, which the life of Ayub. And then this is Ecclesiastes is the book, which these are among the Protestant books. And then Song of Solomon, which is usually deuterocanonical. And then there must be another book, if I see it. No, I don't see it here, so I have to. It's called Sirach, so we'll see that is not included here. So these are the books which we call them wisdom literature. So let's see briefly, because some of these will give us an insight. So I'm going to do the Old Testament and New Testament, and if we find Arabic poetry. So the term wisdom literature as a label for supposedly distinct genre of books in the Hebrew Bible dates back to mid-19th century. They were not called wisdom literature, okay? But I don't think this changes what you have there. You maybe not call Gorestan Andar's Book of Andars or Book of Advices, but it doesn't change the nature, and you will see the similarity. I will show you the example. 3 books from the Hebrew Bible fall under this category: Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. And further 2 are from Apocrypha or Deuterocanonical. The one which Catholic have in them are, this is Wisdom of Solomon. So maybe this is Song of Solomon. It's different. Sorry. This is Song of Solomon. So this is Protestant. Sorry. Song of Solomon. This is not Wisdom of Solomon. So we have only three here. And then Wisdom of Solomon and Sirach are Apocrypha. So there are five books which are called wisdom literature. Actually, I noticed in Harvard right now they have a course called wisdom literature. Very going through these five books very thoroughly. So anyway, this term. Anyway, so what is make these books wisdom literature? Because we want to say there are some similarity in some of the wisdom parts of Quran to some of the things here, like especially advices Luqman to his son, or those verses of Surah Al-Asra to 22 to 39. So what precisely unite these texts and makes them distinctly from texts outside of this genre can be difficult to define. There are disputes. Most popular introduction to biblical wisdom, if they are not skeptical of the category altogether, draw on some combination of formal features and content to try to delineate the most typical characteristics of this genre. At the very least, we can say the biblical wisdom texts are united by preoccupation wisdom. At least you see in these books, lots of talk about wisdom is coming. And the Hebrew term, you see, is very close to hikmah, hukmah, and is a little bit different from Syriac one, but they all have the same root. And the Greek Sophia. So we say, okay, I remember we said these three are accepted by Hebrew Bible. So originally were written in Hebrew. These two were not accepted by Protestants and Jews because originally were written in Greek. But so they use the word Sophia for Hekmah because originally were written in Greek. And then these are using the word Hokmah for wisdom. So the Greek Sophia in the Septuagint happened throughout these texts at a higher frequency that is found outside these works. So you see in these books much more this term is used. Beyond the praise of wisdom often is the form. One thing they have, which is we don't have this kind of imagery in Quran, is, hikmah is a feminine word. So they embodied or imagined hikmah as a lady of wisdom. So beyond the praise of wisdom and encouragement of wisdom and examples of wisdom, in these books, sometimes the wisdom is personified as quasi-divine figure, a female, and then they kind of their conversation with her. So you find it in Proverbs and Sirach and Wisdom of Solomon, which these two of them are deuterocanonical Proverbs and canonical, to give you a little bit feeling what type of sentences we referring, what type of genre we referring. I use the first few sentences of proverb. The first one says the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. So I assign these sentences Solomon, but I don't think this can be really considered truthful. I think Jews collect them later on, but ascribed it as revelation to Solomon, maybe. But these are the type of literature influence people, and when they're hearing wisdom, they would hear something like that. Okay, look, this is like the style. Listen, my son, to your father. Look, this is similar to the Luqman. We see like ya bonaya, that kind of phrasing which Luqman used. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. This is the advice is given. I didn't put the earlier sentences. There are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. So advices of he and the mother to the son. My son, if sinful men entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, come along with us, let's lie in a wait for innocent blood, let's ambush some harmless soul. This kind of daring this young teenagers or older do, and let's go do this, go steal this car, jump in this house, maybe something like that. Let's swallow them alive like the grave and hold. Let's swallow them alive like the grave and hold like those who gone to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. So here, I think encouraging the young girl to robbery. Cast lots with us, and we will all share the loot. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths. For their feet rush into evil. They're swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net where every bird can see it, and so on. The men lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush only themselves. So they only ambush themselves. Such are the paths of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the life of those who get it. So look, this is the kind of advice. We see what kind of literature we're talking about. have so this is the like what called wisdom literature. Uh, these books, especially these three, which are mixed of those five Proverbs and Sirach and Wisdom of Solomon, uh, are further comprised primarily of proverbial sayings that provide precepts for right living, assurance that following such advice leads to prosperity, and warning of dire consequences for choosing folly over wisdom. These ideas exemplify what we call traditional Israelite wisdom. This is a collection wisdom. Maybe you can find in Sadi, or this is beautiful poetry too, or you can find in other places. Some of it may be true wisdom, like Kalamat al-Basat, ascribed to Imam Ali Nahj al-Balagha. So that's a part of the third part of the Nahj al-Balagha. So this kind of wisdom literature. These books are written to teach about or inculcate wisdom in the readers primarily through uh, uh, okay, I think. But the point is that there is a primarily through imparting sage advice or exhorting the readers to consider the working of nature themselves. So this is interesting. So these books are like Sadi Gulistan. That's the reason it was a part of our education. People read this book, listen to the advice, but these are suggest or understandably is the advices by sages collected in many years. And but what other dimension of it, exhorting the readers to consider the working of nature themselves, which I will show you one example of it, and then we'll see one example of Quran. So we said there are five books. These are Hebrew Bible. Three of them we can say it's like Gulistan. They give some advices. They want you to read it, to absorb it in yourself, internalize it, and then also look to the works of wonders of nature. And then in this way, you increase your wisdom. But the other two books are different. We don't have it in religiously books like this. But let's read it and then we'll see where we have one. The other two books in the Hebrew Bible, Wisdom Collection, Job and Ecclesiastes, are often described as a skeptical reaction to the core assertion of the traditional Israelite wisdom tradition that everyone gets their just deserts in the life. These books are a little bit counter. They're wisdom type, but they're negative. They are really bringing question and doubt, and maybe the wisdom is coming through like Zen of confronting those doubts. So look, you see Job, for example, Ayub asked, why do the wicked live on? This is not the Ayub in Islamic tradition, but so we have to see a little bit different. Why did the wicked live on, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? So we have this question, why some of those wicked guys like this, anyway, not mentioning these guys are uh, like Netanyahu. They do all these things. He's still living. And the other author of Ecclesiastes present himself as Solomon, which is impossible to be Solomon. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vanity and chasing after the wind. So, okay, who have this kind of negative wisdom? Khayyam. Khayyam is, I mean, so it seems that the book of Khayyam becomes sacred scripture or accepted. But as I said, uh, Catholics accept this wisdom of Solomon as a part of their the scripture. So you see this negative view. We only classic example of it with Khayyam. And then it's not all people say negative. Some people say Khayyam dark, but some people say at the end of the tunnel is light. I know a Hindu kind of guru which commented on it. Look at like that. Now, so what we see, returning to Proverbs and Sirach and Wisdom, the three positive ones, it is important to note they do not justify the precepts for right living. This is the important feature. Those three which are giving you examples of wisdom, by appeal to Mosaic law. Okay, do your prayer, do your fasting, then things are good. Give your, Sharia, I'm not saying it's not easy, but they are different than the other part of Torah, but rather derive the former from lived experience and observation of nature. So, in other words, the right way to live is presented as knowable not through the revealed law, because mostly Torah, especially some parts of it, is do this, separate, for example, milk and meat and so on. but through contemplation of the universe, for example. So, for example, it said, "Go to ant, you lazy bones, consider its ways and be wise." Uh, and in contrast to the divine revelation to a prophet, therefore, wisdom is available to all willing to seek her. Uh, they use an imagery which I think is not in the Quran is very, you know, worldly. So as I said, they imagine the wisdom as a lady. So this is like about a lady on the heights besides the way. At the crossroads, she take her stand. Besides the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portal, she cries out. So seek her, find her, but she stands in these places, which are a little bit public places, so have some connotations. But look, in that part, which I mean, the language is not polite. The language is really not the language we see in the Quran. Go to the ant, you lazy bones, consider its ways and be wise. But you know, Quran many times encourages us to go see the nature. So, you know, for example, أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت إلى السماء كيف رفعت إلى الجبال كيف نصبت إلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر. So do they not observe the camel to see how it has been created, and the sky how it has been raised, and the mountains how they have been set, and the earth how it has been surfaced? So admonish, so you're only an admonisher. So see, the other thing we have to see when we look into the Quran, examples of wisdom is not necessarily where to place hikmah, the word came. I think this is uh, wisdom inducing verses very similar to, which is looking to the nature reflection, and that reflection Quran wants to do. But this we have to have in mind. But you know, the series for now will focus where the words hikmah has came. Although this, what I wrote for you, the Proverb 8, especially this imagery is interpretation is complicated, and then much of debating rabbis and Christians. Uh, okay, let's go forward. I think, you know, instead of, okay, these are called wisdom literature, the 5 books. But instead of looking to something is fully wisdom literature like Golestan, or at least part of it, Bustan has some wisdom discourse too. Maybe it's not wisdom literature as Golestan, but Bustan, the other book of Sadi, has wisdom literature. So the suggestion here, Sarah Hussein says, and I think we should do it in Quran too, let's look to the wisdom discourse, and it's not necessarily always with the word hikmah came. Although we are going to limit ourselves, but as the example I give you, like this verses of Surah Al-Ghashiyah, which we can have that one too. Okay, let's go faster because I try to look. There is if we continue with the Hebrew Bible, there is a chapter in Deuteronomy that somehow you know, he wants to say, you know, kind of, let me read it for you. Look, it's at attention we see. Look, by focusing on wisdom discourse, we can see that in several passages in the Hebrew Bible, attempt is made to address and resolve the aforementioned tension between wisdom and direct prophetic guidance. You know, this wisdom or revelation, or reason or revelation, or قانون تشریع تکوینی, because wisdom was discovering that so-called قانون تکوینی. And then so now a strategy to navigate the two includes the attempts that seek to sapientialize, sapient, Homo sapiens means rationalize or wisdomize the law. That's, I said, it is there, it is in the Quran. As we said, we should look the legislation Quran through the filter of hikmah. This is not as clearly seen in Torah, but this is one example of it. That is present the law as an instance of wisdom, alternatively to subordinate wisdom to the law. For example, of the former, consider the excerpt from the Deuteronomy below. Okay, usually the wisdom is subordinated to the law, because law, you have to obey it even when you don't understand it. Maybe there is no reason. The only reason or justification is just obedience, or so on. But the one which is somehow says, okay, this legislation is wisdom is this example of Deuteronomy, which is full of lists of detail of you have to do this, kill the animal this way, many detail, many detail. We don't have the only all our Islamic Sharia is understandable, fasting, zakat, homes. The only one we have a little bit more is in Hajj, which have symbolism in it. You go tawaf, you go all those stuff. But much of the Jewish one is not understand except you make a symbolism for them because they're very, just you have to do it. Anyway, I don't want to go there, but see, just as my Lord God has charged me, I now teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. You must observe them diligently, for this will show you wisdom, hikmatakum, hikmatakum, or and discernment to the peoples. So doing these laws shows your wisdom and discernment to other people, who when they hear all these statutes will say, surely this great nation is a wise, hakam, and discerning people. So somehow he wants to say, okay, by doing these laws, which some of it are like purity laws, like I think even dietary laws. We looked at the Chinese; they're not very easily that they're eating whatever, alive, dead, or blood, or so on. Those I know. I think I don't know. That's really the question. It's not repugnant to them, but it's repugnant to us anyway. But we saw that it could be not healthy. To see all of these questions are challenging. But anyway, one problem which I'm not going to go through, that those two books which are not part of the Hebrew Bible but later Protestant accepted, the tension between reason and legislation is more because they're written in the Greek culture and under the Hellenistic culture, that the question of the Greek rose, what you're doing is, what is the meaning of this law? Why it doesn't make sense, doesn't have any reason behind it. We have to do something reason behind it. And the Jews cannot answer it, or the way to have to answer it, okay, we do that because God said, and so on. And you see that tension, that discussion more manifested, especially in those two books, which is Songs of Solomon and Sirach, which there are some interesting examples, but I for now skip it. I think the one verse still we have to important. I want to read where Quran says, "سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين له أنه الحق." The signs of God which see in the horizons and in their souls. So somewhat, this is the way, as they say, when this Jewish culture was become Hellenized, you seek wisdom by reflecting on nature, reflecting on yourself. So in some sense, this is also recognized here. You can see, you don't need to see the signs of God only in the verses of the Quran. You will see inside you and in the horizons, in the nature, and all three combined are the pathway to wisdom. But okay, I haven't opened this. Let's go forward. So I want to go a little bit New Testament. I will show you one example, two example, and then Arabic poetry. I think we're done with it. Look, New Testament are these books are so Mark, Matthew, Luke, John. A bulk of it is the letters ascribed to Paul. Paul has written it. Paul was Hellenized Jew, very well knowing about the Greek philosophy and all those discussion, rabbinic culture. So all the previous traditions he knew very well. But among the books of New Testament, there is a letter of James, which I always say this is close. By accident, I said it on previous lectures that this is closest to the Quran you find. And always I'm surprised. And I really think this must have come from the circle of James, the brother of Jesus. And again, interestingly, in the context of Hikmah, the author doesn't know what my idea is. Says, okay, the Western, many Western scholars, Christian scholars think the wisdom literature in James is there and is more representative, the authentic wisdom literature of the Hebrew Bible. So, and then I will show one or two examples, which is very interesting. I truly believe James is more representative, is coming from the circle brother of Jesus, his successor, and is true Christianity was here. They need to include some of those books by James and Jude. Also, they ascribe he's the brother, another brother of Jesus, to produce a consensus of canon that every group will accept. That Ebionites, which are not believing the Trinity of Jesus or divinity of Jesus, accepting it. So that's why this book is included. Okay. Uh, Prominent New Testament passages that have been linked in scholarly literature with the wisdom genre includes gospel pericopes. Yeah, there are in the Sermon of the Mount, which is the beautiful part of Gospel of Matthew and Luke. Even in Shia hadiths have referred to them. Letters of Paul, which is natural because he was really more Hellenized Jew, and letter of James. And then the letter of James, which is the last one, continues the trend of early Jewish literature, such as 4Q instruction in presenting wisdom as revealed from God. Okay, I think 4Q is Qumran literature, which was discovered. We didn't discuss anything, but here has some interesting verses. You know, these two passages, I want you to look at it. So that James is a letter, which Luther once threw it away from the Bible. He didn't like it because James was saying salvation comes by action, by work, not by grace of God. But you know, he didn't dare to do it, but is relegated to side. They don't look at it much. They don't read it as much. But I think recent years, the last 50, 100 years, there's more attention given to it. But look, this verse is very interesting by James, the fifth verse, section 1. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So this is really somehow related to the verse, or somehow indirectly in discussion in the verse 269 in Surah Al-Baqarah, which we always read in the beginning of the lectures, that it's a khayran kasira, and then when everybody receives that, God gives it to everybody, and then it has got a great blessing. So this is very interesting. And the next one is more interesting too. It says, James says, who is wise and understanding among you? So he's asking some people, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. And then we can understand what understanding they have is wisdom. And then you see, similar to the Luqman, similar to the advices, verse 22-39, Surah Isra. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from down heaven, but is earthly and spiritual, demonic. So this is rationality and wisdom. You know, they used to call philosophy wisdom, but you know, you may be a philosopher but not wise, really. You know, if you do sins and evil, or you have pride. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, and impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So you know how the wisdom is connected to righteousness, peace, and so on. And okay, Paul and Luke incorporate several popular Greek wisdom maxims into their writings. You know, that happens. Many cultures absorb, and we have done it too. Paul, what I didn't list was a Persian culture or Zoroastrian culture, because it may have been absorbed into the books of Bible in time of Daniel and so on, which you know, when I list at the beginning, I list many sources or wisdom tradition before Islam. I didn't refer to Zoroastrian or Islamic ones, Persian ones, but okay, that also could be. Paul is talking a lot about, because he knows about the whole history of natural law and wisdom. I'm not going to go through too much of it because he's suspicious about philosophy. And then nowadays, Hekmah means a lot. Wisdom means that knowing the Greek philosophy, they assume you understanding Greek philosophy become wise, which the same way in Persian nowadays. So we call Hekmah, uh, or Hakim was doctor, and Hekmah Abu Ali Sina, Hekmat Mutaliya, or so on, means knowing those kind of philosopher works. When Gentiles who do not possess the law do instinctively what the law requires, these, though not having the law, are allowed to themselves. So he's saying which part of the law, essentially, which part of the law Gentile can do without knowing the law. It couldn't be the ritualistic one, but is moral part of it. And then he kind of is, because this is the line he later took and put aside all the dietary law or all the purity laws, keep it so-called the moral one, and put the halakha away. But then he says they are law to themselves. He explained, they show that what the law requires is written on their hearts, to which their own conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts will accuse or perhaps excuse them. I mean, the precise meaning is not very clear, but has been much debated, but it's kind of referring to some kind of natural law. But as I said, here apparently he accepting the natural law, but later on it seems he used the word wisdom and disparagingly looked to it in 1 Corinthians, and I think there maybe he's mostly looking to the idea of wisdom prevalent due to Hellenistic culture, Greek culture. So it says, do not deceive yourself. You think that you're wise in this age, you should become fools so that you may become wise. So, unlearn what you learned about this civilization. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. This is the one even I was asked about Sadef. Okay, what Muawiyah was? Muawiyah, because Imam praised a lot about intellect, which we said somehow is related to wisdom or agent of wisdom. But then asking what was Muawiyah was, Muawiyah was the word I forgot Imam said to Hadith, but exactly means his cunningness or cleverness, but not real true or wisdom. So this, I think, this same connotation now they're kind of debating on it. He catches the wise in their craftiness, and again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. So this sense of the wise is not the sense we will be using till now. Let's ignore Paul because Jesus has a lot of teaching in his ministry about the wisdom. It was the corner of it, and then I will come back to it, and especially Sermon of the Mount, many other places. Let's skip it. Yeah, I'm not going to Christian wisdom. Okay, non-biblical. So we want to go the non-biblical Arabian and Semitic wisdom. There must be and have been a tradition of wisdom in Arabic culture, but because they didn't have any tradition of writing, the first book is Qur'an, we don't have very good record of them, and what we have again is more periphery. But I think they were aware of some of
Dr.
these.
Ghoddoussi, sorry to
Yes,
interrupt you. I don't
yes.
know how long we'll take this one, but we
5 minutes.
have two. Okay.
5 minutes. I took 5
Continue.
minutes. Finish. Just as wisdom literature did not begin with the Bible, but rather can be traced to earlier Egyptian, Canaanite, and Mesopotamian literary composition, which I didn't mention. So popular wisdom literature was not confined to biblical and biblical-inspired works in late antiquity. The best-known example of late antique wisdom literature outside Bible and parabiblical works is the story of Ahigar. This may have similarity with Luqman. Maybe the Arabs mixed the story of Luqman and with Ahiqar, what they knew about Luqman, and maybe Quran is correcting that. And the same way Zulqarnain, the mind of Arabs could have become, or the contemporary, a mixture of Alexander and Cyrus or any other category of people. So is a construct. Like Daniel and Joseph, Ahiqar is a court advisor, falls from grace and belief free in prison, and is able to solve riddles, analogous to Joseph, and interpret dreams. It was one of the most popular stories in late antiquity, with Ahigar mentioned in literary works ranging from Deuterocanonical texts, so in the Bible and pre-Islamic poetry, they mentioned to him. I don't go to the story of Ahigar, so we don't have time. You guys search it, will come. It was famous. It's very famous. Known that. I'm not going to go that, but they see some similarity to it in Luqman, and I guess that in the mind of Arab, maybe Luqman was Ahiqar, or maybe there were two people. The stories were mixed, and then Quran, by saying the Luqman, is kind of correcting one. So I don't know right now. Ahiqar and Luqman are separate, or two people, one people. Let's go aside. But as I said last lecture, Tabari has given evidence that Arabs have a separate understanding of Luqman. It is not the Quran. It's clear with the Quran. It's not Luqman introducing Quran introducing them to Luqman. They have some idea about Luqman, and Quran tells some of his story. But okay, I want to go to the pre-Islamic poetry with these 2 poems and finish it. The problem is this. I tried to search it today too, but I didn't find any. And but I didn't find much time to search it. Those search engines. I guess Saga Hussein must have done a good job, so I had to trust him. He said we don't find. I didn't. He didn't find except two examples of hikmah in the pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, and we have two examples, but the word is used. And then he draws some conclusions and like that. So the first one, Al-Asha Maimuna the Qais, recorded Divan, which is, these are also poets which maybe see, uh, just they died before, contemporary with Prophet, so they are not that old. But the first one is nothing special in it, but kind of mentioning becoming older, you become wiser. So he starts to say, surely your companion, the one whom you know of our nights when we would alight at El Jafar. So they spent night together somewhere camping and Jafar, and then those nights had passed. Now they're older, has changed. So this companion which she had, or uh, and then has changed after youthfulness to wisdom. So at gray old age has covered him with a veil. So means youthfulness has he become mature, become wiser, and gray old has covered him with a veil. There is nothing surprising here. Wisdom contrasted with youthfulness. At night parties at Jafar is conjoined with old age and gray hair. So it's lamentation. We saw it, old age. I mean, we see in the first chapter of Republic too. But the next one could be important for what we say, but it's only one example. The second happened in the couplet of Christian poet. Again, it died around the same time, Adi ibn Zayd, which was in the Lakhmid court, which is the court near Kufa, the Christian Arabs, which are affiliated by the Sassanid Empire. And then he says, but this is Christian, and the kings are Christian. They were given the kingdom and the gospel and Injil that we read. We cure with its wisdom, hikmati, our mental powers and vices. So this hikmati goes to Injil. So now you see in the very ancient Arabic poetry, gospel is associated with hikmah, which what Quran does too. I mean, we'll have to see how it does. And our mental powers and vices with the wisdom in it, will we cure our, psychological vices or something like that. And then without him having any need except for making us Lord over his creation, has made it. So there are several conclusions, and with this conclusion, I'm done. One example is that, okay, we don't have any example of hikmah. Could it be conclude that there was hikmah wasn't as important in the pre-Islamic poetry, like other concepts like helm, shaja, or something like that? This is an argument from Excilentu because we don't have enough examples. But if we accept it, because we only find two instances, and one of them was big deal, this is interesting contrast with the Quran, which Quran is mentioning a lot about hikmah, and emphasizing a lot hikmah, and the examples we give. So if that's the case, maybe Quran is the break from its immediate milieu of this Arabic Jahiliyyah or even Christian poetry. But again, because we cannot be sure what we have, whether how much of this ancient pre-Islamic poetry we have had. The other thing which is important, and then as I mentioned it, and we're going to see, is that even the poetry Adi ibn Zayd, we have a presence of association between the gospel and hikmah among Arab Christians in pre-Quranic era. And Quran also maintains this association. And also, interestingly, he juxtaposed mulk and hikmah, which we will see it in our commentaries, because he said they were given the kingdom and mulk and the gospel. And that's what we see also in Quran, sometimes combine hikmah and rulership in these verses. Yeah, I stop here. So the two features I want to say: association of gospel with hikmah in the pre-Arabic poetry, but one example, and association more with hikmah. I think this gives us the background to be ready to go to really directly the Quranic commentary. I'm thank you for your patience. So I stop here the sharing, and if question I can try to